Hello everyone and welcome back to the next topic in our journey of C programming language. Here in this particular video we are going to have a look at the topic called as structures. Today's modern applications require complex data structures to support them. For example, the structures needed to support the graphical user interface found in computer workstations, Windows, obviously are very complex. So complex, in fact, that they could not be built using the relatively primitive data types that we have seen so far in our journey of C. A much more powerful capability is needed. That is actually the role of structures. Let me ask you a question. Which mechanic is good enough who knows how to repair only one type of vehicle? And believe me, the same thing is true with respect to C language. It would not have been so popular had it been able to handle only primary constants or secondary constants. Let me give you a brief introduction about this particular topic called as structures. Structures is an advanced and most popular topic in the world of C language. The language C itself has quite good number of built-in primitive and derived data types. But still, not all real-world problems can be solved using those primitive and derived data types. You need custom data type for different situations. For example, when you design a program, it is extremely important to choose an optimal way to represent the data that the program processes. In simple cases, ordinary variables and arrays are sufficient. However, let me tell you very frankly, in practical programming context, you need a new form of variable that actually reflects the real world. Now, say for example, if I want to keep track of the details of maybe 100 employees who are working in my organization, right? Now, when I talk about the employees of my organization, the details that I'm interested in maintaining would be probably the name of the employees, their age, their department, their designation, their mobile numbers, and probably their salaries. Now, when you look at these different so-called fields which belongs to one employee. Say when you look at name of an employee, it's nothing but a character array. When you look at age of an employee, let us say we are just only entering the age without months, only in terms of years, then it just becomes an integer data type. The department, the address can be again a character array. The mobile number is again an integer, and salary, it belongs to float data type. So all these are different data types. You agree with me? Now just imagine how much cumbersome it will be in order to manage these details of all the 100 employees. If I do not have sufficient knowledge of C, what I'll end up doing is I just say, for example, name of the employee. I will say char name 1, char name 2, char name 3. Like that, I will have 100 variables with respect to character data type or a character array, which will help me to store the names of all my employees. Similarly, if I want to talk about age of my employees, I will say int age 1, age 2, age 3, or probably I may go for an array. But still, it is very much cumbersome to manage. To overcome this, we need a user-defined data type. And in this particular video, I am going to explain how easily we will deal with these type of situations using structures in C programming language. Let us closely look at this particular schematic diagram which is there in front of you. The entire world of data types in C programming language is in 4 categories. The basic data types, the derived data types, the enumeration, and the last one is void. Now, when you talk about basic data types, I don't think I need to, explain you at this point of time, because we have been, involved. We have been involved right from day one with respect to basic data types, where we studied integer, float, character, and such type of things. Derived data types are those data types that are actually derived from fundamental data types. We have already seen this also. For example, arrays, pointers, functions, and now structures as a point in derived data type, as one of the category of derived data type. But before we move on to structures in more depth, let me just give you about enumerated and void. Enumerated types are a special way of creating your own data type in C. As a matter of fact, these enumeration or so-called enumerated types allows us to create our own symbolic names for a list of related ideas. And the keyword that is used for this enumeration is called as enum. I spell it out, E-N-U-M, enum. And void you have already come across in functions topic. It is an empty data type that has actually no value. We use void data type in functions when we don't want to return any value to the calling function, which you are already well versed about this particular data type. Now, let us look at the definition of a structure. What is a structure? The structure is a user-defined data type in C, which is used to store a collection of different kinds of data. Structure helps to construct a complex data type which is more meaningful. In fact, if you ask me, it is somewhat similar to an array, but definitely there's a difference. What is that? Array holds data of similar type only, but structure on the other hand can store data of any type, which is practically more useful for us in solving real-time problems. What I would like to say is, C structure allows you to wrap related variables that has different data types into a single variable. A struct is a type used to represent a heterogeneous collection of data. As a matter of fact, it is a mechanism for treating a set of different types as a single coherent unit. What I would like to tell you is, structure is perhaps the more sophisticated of the two native data structures that C supports. One is an array and the second one is a structure. I always feel structure is more sophisticated. It is true to say, with my experience, that with an array and a structure, you can do just about anything in this world. But to do anything safely, you need to know exactly how structure works. Structs, that is a structure, have a slightly complicated syntax. But let me assure you, if you follow how they work, it all makes sense. Now let us look at how to create a structure. We basically use a keyword called as struct to create a structure in C. The struct keyword is actually a short form of structured data type. So the syntax is, you have a struct followed by a structure name, then you have the opening flower braces, followed by a couple of stuffs inside, which we call it as member elements, right? And then you have closing curly braces with semicolon. So struct is a keyword, structure name is nothing but name of a structure, and you have data type member 1, data type member 2, which is nothing but member elements, where each of these member elements is represented by some or the other primitive data types. Now when I say primitive data types, it can be either an integer or a character or a float or anything else depending upon your application. Let me give an example for this structure. Look at this. It closely resembles your syntax. Struct is a keyword and then followed by employee. So here employee is a name of the structure. right? It's a structure name. And this particular structure has got three member elements. Those member elements are called as EMP ID, EMP name, which is a character array, and float EMP salary. Okay, so let me put this in the form of a C code so that you will have a better understanding of how actually structure works in the world of C. So I just copy and paste from my PowerPoint slides, and then you'll have a look at this. Oh, now that's the problem with copy and paste. That doesn't matter. I can get rid of it. Anyhow, we have already made a statement that committing syntax error is C programmer's birthright. It's just a matter of time. Okay, so that is what it looks to me, structure. So when you look at here, now line number 4 is where I'm having my structure all the way from line number 4 to line number 8. So this is what I was talking about. Struct is a keyword, employee is a name of a structure, and I have three member elements, right? Line number 5, 6, 7. The first member element is EMP underscore ID, which is nothing but I'm trying to store the employee ID, right? So that's how I have given my variable name. The name of the employee, that's a member element, EMP underscore name, which is a character array of 10 dimension. And salary of my employees I am trying to store in a variable called as EMP underscore salary, which is of float data type. So int is a data type and EMP ID is a member element. Similarly, I can say float is a data type and EMP salary is a member element. Now let me go back to the PPT. Now, the next point, once we have that particular thing in place, right, what is called as how to create a structure in programming or C programming, let us see the next point is how to declare the structure variable. Now, there are two ways of declaring a structure variable, right, so that we can access the members of the structure very easily. The first one is we use a keyword struct within the main function, and the second one is by declaring a variable at the time of defining the structure, right? So the first one is within the main and the second one is declaring a variable at the time of defining the structure. Now the first method is like this. You write the given code inside the main function, right, and followed by struct employee E1, E2. Now when I say struct employee E1, E2, the significance of this particular statement or line is struct is a keyword, employee is the name of the structure, which we also call it as a structure tag. E1 and E2 are structure variables. Be careful, E1 and E2 are actually structure variables which are used to access the values stored in the structure. Okay, so please understand, I'm not making a statement that E1 and E2 are variables which belongs to integer data type or float data type or anything of that category. E1 and E2 has got a special meaning here. They are called as structure variables which are used to access the values stored in the structure. So this is the first method of accessing the variables, right? The second method is to declare the variables at the time of defining the structure itself. So instead of, look at the last line of the slide, instead of having the curly braces followed by semicolon, you can have those structure variables E1 and E2 separated by comma in between the closing curly braces and the semicolon, right? So this is the second way of doing what we call it as declaring the structure variables, right? Now, having known these two variables, $1 million question that comes in mind is which approach is good, right? let me tell you very honestly, right? Of course, it is left up to the programmer. But if you ask me which approach is good, whether the first one is good or the second one is good, I would like to say like this. If number of variables are not fixed, use the first approach. Why? Because it provides you the flexibility to declare the structure variable many times. On the other hand, if number of variables are fixed, go ahead and use the second approach because it saves your code to declare a variable in the main function. The next point is accessing members of the structure. How do we go about in accessing the members of the structure? Have a look at this. There are two ways of accessing the members of the structure. The first one is we use a dot operator, and the second one is we use a arrow operator, right? That is called as structure pointer operator. Okay, it is called as a arrow operator, which is a combination of minus and greater than sign. I repeat, it is a combination of minus and greater than sign, which we call it as a arrow operator, which is nothing but structure pointer operator. Please do not press the right arrow key for this particular way of accessing and tell that, sir, that minus greater than is not working. On the other hand, the cursor is moving towards right hand side. It will not work. The right arrow key is not the solution for this. It is a combination of minus and greater than. Okay, so what we do is let us go back to our online programming and see how this works. So this I already have, and what I will do is I am going to follow the first method of having the structure variables, right? The first method of declaring the structure variables. So how do you do it? I just say struct, right? And my name of the structure is this one, employee, which is there in line number 4. So I should have it here, employee, right? Followed by two variables called as E1 and E2. So look at this line number 9 very carefully, right? Struct is a keyword, employee is a name of a structure which should match with this, otherwise you'll end up getting syntax error. E1 and E2 are structure variables which belongs to this particular structure. Okay, now let us proceed with, and what we will make an attempt is we will write a program which will keep track of two employees. Okay, so what I'll do is I will go ahead and develop a program for you which will keep track of two employees of mine. Okay, so I say printf so I have my enter employee details, I'll just say enter first employee ID, and then I will say scanf. Okay, now here you have to be a little bit careful, right? Now this is what I was telling sometimes back in terms of how to access the members of the structure. And we have seen in our PPT slide that there are two ways of accessing the member structure. The first one is using dot operator. Now watch out carefully. If I am not well versed with structure and with whatever the knowledge I have, what you do is in order to enter the first employee ID, you just land up telling emp_id, and then you will say, sir, anyhow you have declared here in line number 5 emp_id, so I am going to write it here. Okay, now what is the consequence of this? Now when you write it like this, right, what it does is it will search for a variable called as emp_id. It should belong to integer data type as a separate entity. But then what happens is, even though you have this line number 5, this line number 5 is in between line number 4 and line number 8. That means this line number 5 declaration statement is a part of your structure. It is not separate. It is a part of your structure. And hence what happens, since it is a part of your structure, any attempt made by you by giving like this will result into a syntax error. Let us have a look at it. I just run my program now, and you see here it says, emp underscore id undeclared, right? Obviously, because I have told you the fact that it will search for this emp id as a separate statement. Okay. Now next, you may say, sir, anyhow you are trying to enter the first employee id. So what I will say is, I will say e1 employee id. Okay. Now that is the second mistake I am committing. Now when you do like this, your compiler will check for a variable called as e1 emp underscore id, right? Now let us see what is the consequences of that. Now when I compile, I get another error, more or less a similar error of undeclaration, right? So again, this is not accepted. Now that is what it now comes to say, that a way to access the structure members. So how do we go about it? As I told earlier, we make use of dot operator, and that dot operator usage is like this. You say ampersand e1 dot emp underscore id. So this is what you mean to say. Okay, have a look at this particular dot in line number 12, which is in between e1 and emp underscore id. This is the dot operator which will allow the programmer to access the structure members. Now, if you closely look at this dot operator, on the left hand side of the dot operator, you have a structure variable, correct? Do you agree? It is E1, which is a structure variable given in line number 9. And on the right hand side of the dot operator, you have emp underscore id, which is nothing but the member element, right? So this is how you access the dot operator. You access the structure members using dot operator. I repeat, on the left hand side of the dot operator, you will have a structure variable, and on the right hand side of the dot operator, you will have a member element. Okay, so let us see whether this is accepted or it lands up giving you an error, right? Very good, fantastic. So it's fine. That's how it works actually, right? So I'll just give, because the program is incomplete, but for your satisfaction, I have just given it, right? Because you're not doing any further execution, so it just accepts the first employee ID and just keeps quiet, right? So I hope things are very clear with you in terms of the structure declaration, in terms of the structure variable, and also in terms of the dot operator. Okay, now let us spend some more time in completing this program. Now what I'll do is, I have this employee ID. I will go and land up entering the name of the employee. So I'll say enter first employee name, and that is a character array. So I just say %s, and then I don't need this, and this is employee emp underscore name, correct? So this is a character array, and then what I do is I'll end up entering once again. I say enter first employee salary. So this is a float data type. So I say %f and ampersand e1 dot emp, and what is there in line number 7? It is emp underscore salary. So I'll just write here emp underscore salary. Okay. Now watch out. This is how I enter my details of the first employee, right? So here I have entering the first employee ID, then line number 14 will give me the name of the first employee, and line number 16 will give me the salary of the first employee. All I am using variable E1, right? Now, since I am keeping track of 2 employees, right, the second employee structure variable is E2. So what I do is, I again have the same details, but this time for my second employee. So let me not waste the time in typing the program. So I'll just say here, enter second employee ID. Okay. And the small change that I'm going to make is, Now my second employee belongs to E2, so I just say E2.emp underscore ID, right? All other explanation remains the same. So again, I say enter second employee name, and then I will say E2.emp underscore name, and then I'll say enter second employee salary, and then I make it as E2.salary. Okay, so this is my details of the employees that I am entering. Now what I want is I want to print the details of all my employees. Okay, so what I will do is I will just say I'll just have a copy of this line, and what I'm going to do is whatever the details I have entered, I am going to output it on my standard output device, and I just say employee details are as follows. Okay, a simple statement. And then what I do is I will have my employee ID, so that will be my first one. So I just say printf /n ID, that is the ID, and I just need E1 EMP ID. So that is the employee ID of my first employee. And then next I will say name of my first employee. So I just say name, its format specification is %s, and I just say here name. Then I go to my third details, that is salary, and you know it is it's integer float, so %f, and then I just remove this and I say salary. So these three lines, line number 26, 27, 28 will give you the details of the first employee. Similarly, what I do is I'll just print the details of the second employee. Very simple for me. I have to just replace this 1 by 2. The rest all things remains the same. Okay, so that is what I have done. So the whole idea here is you enter the details of two employees in terms of ID, name, and salary, and then once you enter, you display it, right? So let us see whether this works. Yeah, so enter employee details, so it's working fine. My program is absolutely free of syntax error. Okay, so I'll just enter first employee ID as 11. I will end, right? So that is what it is asking. Enter first employee name. I will just say Amar. Okay, and it is asking my first employee salary. Let us say I just say 100.45, right? So this is the details of my first employee, and then it is asking me to enter the second employee details. It's asking for second employee ID. I will just say 22. Okay, and I will say Amar, and then I will say Akbar as the second employee name, and the salary of the second employee I will just say 200.45, right? So I have entered the details of my two employees, right? And let me see what is the output. So this is the output. Employee details are as follows. ID is 11, Amar, and 100.44. Of course, that is the floating point concept. You don't need to worry much about it. And then ID 22 with name as Akbar and salary as 200.44, right? So this is how basically structure works in C programming language. Let me help you to recap before I close this particular video, right? I have line number 4. I have struct employee, where struct is a keyword, employee is a structure tag. Line number 5 to 7, I have member elements, 3 member elements called as employee ID, employee name, and employee salary. And these member elements belongs to different primitive data types, integer, character, and character array, and then float. Line number 9, I have two variables called as E1 and E2. They are special variables. They are actually called as structure variables, right? And then line number 12, I am making use of the so-called dot operator, right? Extremely important in the world of C programming language, what is called as dot operator, because it is one method which will allow the programmer to access the members of the structure, right? So you have made use of this dot operator. On the left hand side of the dot operator, you have a structure variable, and on the right side of the dot operator, you have the member elements, right? So the same concept you have followed in line number 12, 14, and 16 to get the details of the first employee. Similarly, you have done it in line number 19, 21, and 23 to get the details of the second employee. Okay, so whatever the details you have entered with respect to two employees, the same thing you are outputting on your standard output device, right? Through line number 26 to 32. So this is how basically a structure works in C programming language, right? So I'll just give you a couple of seconds to have a look at it. Okay, right? So of course, the second way of accessing, that is structure pointer operator, which we call it as an arrow operator, we will see in the upcoming videos where we discuss how pointers and structures are related to each other. Now, the last point before I close this particular video is how structure elements are stored, right? Now, if you try to recollect your previous topic called as arrays, right? We have seen how array elements are stored. And the statement we made was array elements are always stored in one continuous memory location. And so is truth with respect to structure, right? In structure, the elements are stored in continuous memory location. Let us have a look at how these elements of structure are stored. It's very simple, right? And now let us say I am keeping track of employee ID, name, and salary, right? Now, assuming that integer occupies 4 bytes, so I have my starting address as 1001. So from 1001 to 1004, this 4 bytes is occupied with the employee ID, right? The ID of the first employee. So let us say the ID of first employee is 1234, right? Which is stored in 4 bytes. Then name of the employee is character array, which takes 10 bytes, right? So it is from 1005 to 1014, right? For the lack of space, I've just used a short notation. 1005 to 1014, name of the employee is, let us say, Shankar. And the salary of an employee, right? It is a float data type. Let's assume it takes 4 bytes. So we have 1015, 16, 17, 18. So when you look at the ID, name, and salary of the first employee, it is stored all the way from address 1001 to 1018, right? All the way from 1001 to 1018. Okay. Now, what you actually mean by structure elements are stored in one continuous memory location is, first, the details of the first employee is stored. That is what you see on your screen. First, you have the ID, followed by the name, and followed by the salary. So the details of all the the details of the first employee, all the details of the first employee is stored. And once the salary is stored of the first employee, that is at 1018, at 1019, the details of the second employee starts. Okay, I repeat, first the details of the first employee is stored, and then the details of the second employee is stored. That is what you mean to say structure elements are stored in continuous memory location. Let me warn you, please do not be under impression that first the employee ID of all the employees will be stored, then names of all the employees will be stored, then salary of all the employees will be stored. No, right? C behaves in a different way. It will not do like that as you want it to be. Okay, so it has got its own way of dealing things, right? And that is what it does, right? So it will store the details of the first employee, and then it will store the details of the second employee. Okay, So when you talk about this, the size of the structure, right? The size of the structure purely depends upon the size of the data type which you are using inside the member elements, right? Let me take you back to the code and then look at this, right? Let us say your integer occupies 4 bytes. So I'll just write integer is 4 bytes, and then your character array, right? Since even though character occupies 1 byte, you have character array which is 10, and then this entire statement, let us say it occupies 10 bytes, and then float employee salary occupies another 4 bytes. So this occupies totally 18 bytes, right? So for first employee, it occupies totally 18 bytes. So how do you simply define the total amount of memory capacity occupied? It is nothing but the sum total of all the data types which you are using with respect to your member elements, right? So this total integer plus character array plus float, that comes out to be 18. Okay, so this is the meaning of the total amount of memory capacity occupied by your structure. Okay, so that is what we have seen, how the what is the importance of structure in the world of C programming language. We have seen the different data types that are available in C, right? And then we have seen how to land up creating a structure in C programming, how C programming helps the programmer to create a structure with the help of a keyword called as struct. Then we moved on to the next point, what we call it as declaring a structure variable, right? We have seen that declaring a structure variable can be done in two ways, right? And then we also had a question in terms of which approach is good. And the last thing is what we have seen is how to access the members of the structure. Again, there you have two ways of doing it. One is through dot operator and the other one is through structure pointer operator. So I think this much basic is more than sufficient for you, right? Go through the entire stuff once again carefully, try to understand and make your basics clear. This is extremely important what I have told you in this particular video, right? So I will see you in the next video to explore the amazing potential that C gives to the programmers in its own world.